Okay, I got the word that we can begin. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Cindy Coman. I'm one of the members of the Voices Committee here at Hudson Valley. And so I want to welcome you to Voices, a Library Lecture Series. We would like to begin with an acknowledgement that we are gathered on the sacred homelands of the Mohikaniak, or Mohegan people, who are the stewards of this land. Today, the community resides in Wisconsin and is known as the Stockbridge-Munsee Mohegan Nation. We pay honor and respect to their ancestors, past and present. Voices presents speakers on timely and enduring issues each semester to broaden and enrich the scope of studies at Hudson Valley Community College. There's a survey that's being handed out, and so if you can complete that, that would be great. If you didn't get one, there is a copy when you leave. You can fill one out and place it in the basket. This helps to inform our future programming, so we appreciate your responses. Today, Voices would like to present Graham Healy. Graham is the Community Program Manager for the Mental Health Association of New York State. Graham trains individuals in mental health literacy, helping them to better understand mental wellness, and coordinates 7 programs in the Capital Region and across the state in the MHA affiliate network. These programs include a community mental health promotion project, which provides grants, training, and technical assistance to county-level MHA affiliate teams, and oversees a voter empowerment project in the Capital Region, which aims to inform and empower individuals with lived experiences of their right to vote. So please welcome Graham Healy.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for the introduction. So my name is Graham Healy, and I am the Community Program Manager at the Mental Health Association in New York State. So you heard a little bit about my role, but I think sometimes when we do things like this and we get introductions, it's always focused on like the professional, like what do I do for work, what do I do for a job, and oftentimes when we introduce ourselves to others in the community, it's what do I do, whether it's I'm a student or what is my role in a professional capacity. So real quick about myself is I used to be a student here at Hudson Valley many years ago. I won't tell you how long ago, but quite a while. I studied just general associate, transfer degree, and I'm also a father. I'm a community member. I born and raised in the Capital Region. I've lived all over the country in multiple places, but I currently live in Albany. And so that's just a few things about me. As we go through this presentation today, as you go through learning about wellness and thinking about yourself and how to focus on yourself and care for yourself, I want you to think about your identity and your roles and all the different roles that you fulfill in your life, not just as in a professional capacity at work or as a student, right? Because we're more than just that. But speaking of work and speaking of the Mental Health Association in New York State, let me tell you a little bit about us. So we are the Mental Health Association in New York State, or since that's a bit of a mouthful, we go by MHANYS to make it a little bit easier to say. You can see our mission statement up on the screen, but in essence, our goal is to end stigma against mental health, right? To end the stigma against mental health, and we do it in a variety of ways. We want to promote mental health and wellness, especially in everyday life. That's really important in everyday life, and we do it through a variety of activities, things like education, whether that's K through 12 or in higher ed, in advocacy, in policy and development. We focus on working in communities themselves and working with communities, as well as connecting people to the care that they need when they need it. We have 26 affiliates across New York State, so we are a statewide agency, and then we're also part of the Mental Health America Network, which is countrywide as well. So, what is mental health, right? Let's talk about that. The World Health Organization states that there is no health without mental health. And what that really means is that there's no separation between our physical health and our mental health, right? We have to consider it as one and the same, of how they are linked together, right? Health is a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of a disease. And what we want to do then is we want to stop thinking about our mental health and our wellness as merely being ill or not, right? Merely more than just the presence or the absence of a disease. And we want to shift in our mindset and think of ourselves on a continuum of being well or unwell. And where we find ourselves on any given day, right, is going to change. It's going to fluctuate. And it should, right? Some days we're more well, some days we're a little bit more unwell. And day to day, week to week, month to month, year to year, that is going to change. And where we find ourselves on that kind of that continuum of wellness is going to be unique to each and every one of us. So it's difficult. Like, we often want to compare ourselves with others. That is a really common thing. It's a human thing to do. But we want to really be focused on ourselves in this instance, and our baseline of what is wellness for us. How do we consider ourselves healthy? We want to reframe this conversation, shift it away from talking about being ill or having an illness or having the absence of an illness equates health, right? And we want to shift it over to that continuum of wellness, really understanding, are we well or are we unwell? And check in on ourselves on every single day. So how do we do that? How do we start to understand our wellness? Well, we want to do it through a multi-dimensional approach. So I'm going to show some dimensions of wellness on here that were created by SAMHSA. And we're going to work through them and just talk about them real quick. And the first few that you're going to see, you might be pretty familiar with already. Many people are even being taught about them in elementary, middle, and high school, and that's wonderful, right? You might have even heard it talked about as social emotional learning, right? Where we teach people how to kind of approach their feelings and approach difficult situations. So these three dimensions of the 8 dimensions of wellness here, the first one is pretty obvious, physical wellness. You probably already have a pretty good idea that diet, that exercise, right, that it influences your health, that it influences your wellness. But the more we learn about mental health, the more you're going to understand how intrinsically linked mental health is with our physical health. There are a lot of physical health diagnoses out there that are linked with mental health diagnoses, right? If somebody is at risk or suffers from heart disease or diabetes, right, they're now more at risk of other mental health conditions as well, other mental health challenges. So being able to take care of our physical wellness impacts our entire mind and body. Now, with emotional wellness, that's where we're talking about somebody's ability to cope, right, or to deal with difficult situations in their lives, to deal with stress, to deal with anxiety, right, to deal with those tough points in somebody's life and kind of bounce back. Emotional wellness is also really key when we're thinking and talking about recovery, right, which is where somebody recovers from an illness, from a mental health challenge. And it's not something that's often talked about enough. And we're going to talk about that more later on in this presentation, so I'll come back to that. And then with social wellness, that's where we're really talking about those interpersonal relationships that you might have, right? Your family, your friends, your loved ones, your coworkers, your classmates, your community members, the people that you interact with. And we know that having a connectedness with other people amplifies our ability to take care of ourselves. Being able to rely on others, right, on difficult moments, but also being the person that somebody else can rely on can be a boon for yourself as well. So, humans are social creatures. We want to interact with others. We want to feel connected in various capacities, in various ways. So it's really important that we don't neglect that aspect of our wellness in whatever capacity feels you're more comfortable with. Now, I'm going to throw up some other dimensions on here, and for some of you, these might be new, right? And it seems like there will be a lot when it pops up on the screen, but once I start to go through it, I think you're going to have a good understanding of a lot of these already. So let's throw those up here. The first one I want to talk about is occupational wellness. Now, this isn't that you're good at your job or not. That's not what we're saying, right? My wellness is doing well in this area because I'm doing really well at work. No, what it means is that you have a sense of job security, that your work is meaningful to you in some way, right? It doesn't have to be your day-to-day work that you do, but maybe you work for an organization that you feel makes a difference, and that connects with you, right? That fuels you, right? And again, that your work is meaningful to you, that your work is meaningful. Now, with spiritual wellness, a lot of times people focus on like organized religion, and that's obviously can be one aspect of this if that's important to you. But really what we're talking about spiritual wellness is, do you have a connection to a greater sense of self, right? A greater sense of purpose, right? A greater sense of purpose. Are you focusing on creating a legacy, something that you will build upon, that's meaningful for you beyond just the work that you do on a day-to-day basis? And there's a lot of different ways to build this up. You can connect with community groups, you can volunteer, you can obviously connect with religious organizations. There's a lot of different ways to focus on this. Now, with intellectual wellness, obviously, we're here at Hudson Valley, and a lot of people, when they're talking about intellectual wellness, they're going to focus on degrees. They're going to focus on getting certificates, and that's absolutely a certain aspect of this. But more than that, intellectual wellness is really focused on improving yourself by gaining new knowledge, and really in whatever way that you deem best for you. That could be through higher education. That could be through finding new skills and developing them in a new hobby. It could be reading up on information of something that you're already interested in or learning something brand new. But the most important thing is that you're improving yourself, that you're seeking out to gain new knowledge. That's the important part of intellectual wellness. Now, the last two here with environmental and financial. This is where sometimes it gets a little tricky because people feel like maybe they're not necessarily in total control of these, and that can absolutely be part of it. With environmental wellness, it's really focused on, are you occupying stimulating and rewarding environments? And sometimes we're in control of that, and sometimes we're not. But we always want to be asking ourselves, is this environment supporting me in my wellness? Is it making me feel better, or is it making me feel worse, right? Is it making me feel well, or is it making me feel unwell? And to the degree that we can control that at certain points of our lives can be really difficult. But it doesn't mean that we should ignore it and not notice it and not pay attention to it. Because sometimes there are little things that we can do to manage that and help ourselves in those areas. And now with financial wellness, that's more focused not on like whether you have enough money, which obviously can be part of it, but it's more about, do you have a satisfaction with your finances? And so we know that having more money does not necessarily equate feeling well, right, in this dimension of your wellness. It doesn't necessarily bring happiness. But we also know that everybody's financial values, everybody's financial needs are going to be unique and different. And then to the degree that we can control that, especially at various points of our lives, isn't always necessarily up to us, right? It may feel a little bit out of our control. But again, it's important that we recognize it, that we notice it, that we pay attention to it, even if we feel like it's something that we're not in total control of. Now, when we're talking about these 8 dimensions, you might have thought and seen on here like, wow, I actually feel pretty good in one area, and then another area I don't feel so great, right? Maybe that area is lacking. Let me let you in on a little secret. That's perfectly normal. That's typical. We all do, right? Just as I was telling you before, you find yourself on any given day, whether you're a little bit more well or unwell, you're going to feel that fluctuation and that continuum as well in each dimension of your wellness, and each of these 8 dimensions. There are going to be some days and weeks and months and years that your physical or your spiritual, social like wellness are your strengths and things that you can rely on to be better, to be stronger than others. And some other areas of improvement that you might have, some areas that might need a little bit more attention. And that's okay. I'm telling you that it's okay, and I really mean that. We all have areas where we can improve. We all have areas where we feel stronger in. And then over time, those different dimensions and those strengths that you have, and those areas where you feel like you might necessarily need to like improve on, they're going to switch, they're going to change, and they're going to develop. And where we feel strong in an area, somebody else that you might be close to might feel weaker or have an area of improvement, right? The dimensions of our wellness are going to be unique to us, just as we find ourselves on that daily continuum of are we well or unwell. So I want to switch gears a little bit. I'm gonna keep the 8 dimensions up here, but I actually want to ask you in the audience a couple questions. Looking at these dimensions, looking at these 8 areas that are up here, and I'm going to put them up kind of in writing so it's a little bit easier to kind of break it down and look through. I want to hear from you. What are some areas that, not necessarily do you think you need to improve on, but what are some things you can do to help improve in some of these areas? And so I want to just throw it out to the audience. I have some examples in my back pocket, but I want to hear from you, right? Because I think it's a lot better when we hear from the community, when we hear from people in the audience, their ideas on how to improve themselves. Because I'm not going to be up here telling you, like, this is what you need to do and focus on this area. I think only you, as the expert to yourself, can really, guide your own process in this. So does anybody have any examples of things that they might be able to do to improve their wellness in a certain area, in one of these different dimensions? Go right here.
I was going to say, like, maybe meditation before you get out of bed, right after you get out of bed, before you begin the day.
Sure, and what area, what dimension? In spiritual wellness, right? Yeah, absolutely. And meditation is, or mindfulness, right? If meditation might feel a little bit too intense for some people, if they haven't practiced that, it could be really, really important on focusing oneself. Absolutely. And then
I feel like something every college student can relate to would be physical and sleep. Like focusing on your sleep hours.
Yeah, focusing on your sleep, absolutely, and your physical wellness. And you're right, as college students, I know it was really difficult for me, right? Your days are full. They're jam-packed. And if you're doing any activities outside of your classes, right, if you're involved in any groups or clubs and you work, right, as well, it can feel like a lot. So focusing on your sleep and getting that rest is absolutely vital. And sometimes we feel like maybe that's a little bit out of our control. But when we can control it, when we can focus on it, can absolutely be helpful. All right, what about anybody else? Yeah.
Adding on to what you said about days being packed, try to find some time for friends, family, so that helps you clear your mind, get away from all the work, the stress, kind of gives you a little bit of a break.
Absolutely, yeah. So in your social, right? So focusing on social wellness, getting that interconnectedness, right? Feeling connected with other people. I know that's an area that I've struggled with in the past. I have 2 young kids, right? So I go to work, I get them from school, I go home, right? Get them through their routines. It's really easy for me at that point. They go to bed, for me just to crash, right? I'm exhausted. I've had a long day. I want to just watch something. I want to binge watch something, whether I even like it or not, right? It's just easy. It's at my fingertips, right? Scroll my phone, right? Who feels better after scrolling their phone for a while, right? Nobody does. But it's easy to do that. So when I found myself forced to connect with other people, right? Whether it's in a virtual space or in person, saying yes to those invites to do things, even though I want to just sit down. I want to just say, no, I'm good, knowing that it's better for my wellness. It's better for me, right? It's really, really hard to do at times, but it's a really good point. Making that effort to feel connected is really, really big. Anybody else want to share anything? Okay. Yeah, back there.
I think meeting in common places to find friends is helpful because in college it can be hard to make friends. So joining a club or a sport, and working a job where you're in the same place as somebody else, you can meet friends that way.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's putting yourself in the maybe the awkward or uncomfortable position, right, at first. To be out there and meet people, because it's so easy again to pull in, to not put yourself out there, but that uncomfortableness at first feels that way, and then later on you will have an area of your wellness that's a little bit stronger, where you have people you can rely on, and people who just bring you joy, right? That's really important. I also saw another hand, somebody up over this way. Yeah.
I know I struggle with the financial part because I would like my bank account to look a certain type of way. I am a supervisor, so my occupation, it pulls me away from school sometimes to try to find a balance to make money, pay my bills, live how I want to live, and still study.
Yeah, it's a balancing act. It's a lot. It can absolutely be a lot. And again, that financial wellness aspect, sometimes it's not always up to us exactly what that looks like, right? The amount of money coming in, right? Especially as students, because you have a limited amount of time, right? I wonder, how many of you are working and going to school? right? And that's obviously not unique to a community college, right? To a commuter school, but it's also becoming more and more common on four-year universities as well. That is just the way it is. And so you're balancing so many different things. So when you know that you're taking a hit in one areas of your wellness, right? Obviously we want to work on that. But sometimes strengthening or focusing on an area that we're already doing well in can also help support our wellness in other ways, right? Just because a certain area needs more doesn't mean that we can't still focus on the areas where we're a little bit stronger. And we're going to touch on the occupational aspect a little bit when we talk about work here in just a minute. So I'm going to go back to that, so I didn't answer that just right away. So I think it's important to realize that there are things that we can do as individuals to focus on our wellness. And this is just real quick. Like, I didn't teach you anything like out of the ordinary. You already had the language and the tools and the knowledge of how to improve certain areas of your life, right? You already know the things that are going to make you feel better. And we're going to dive into that a little bit more. So it's important to keep that in mind. This is not revolutionary. This is already at the tip of your tongues. This is knowledge that you already have. It might just be framed a little bit differently today. Now, speaking of work, real quick, on average, right, how much of our adult life do we spend at work? Somebody give me a percentage. I'll go right back here. Half, right? Anybody want to go higher or lower? A third, right? Okay. Go ahead. Higher than a third or higher than half? Yeah, higher than half. 75%. Sure. Yeah, and I'm going to put a big caveat up here. I'm going to put a number up here, and then I'm going to break this down and talk about it a little bit. On average, and average is the key word here, it's a third, right? 8-hour shift, right? 8 hours of sleep you're supposed to get, right? So that leaves another 8 hours for yourself. A third, only a third for yourself. But again, that's on average. That's not counting people who are salaried, right? Who work those 50, 60-hour weeks. All of a sudden that number's climbing up. That's not counting on the people who need to work more hourly because they need to make more money because their wages aren't high enough to support their living, right? So we know that for individuals, this number can be significantly higher, right? People working 2-3 jobs. So if we spend a lot of time at work, right, if that's a significant, at least a third of our adult life, then we know that we need to focus on that wellness at work, how it impacts us in the job, right? Whether it's in an office, whether it's in retail, it doesn't matter the kind of work. We still need to focus on our wellness. And some of that is up to us as individuals, and some of it is going to be based on the organization that we're actually at. So why does mental health matter in the workplace? Well, who's ever heard the phrase before, leave your lives at the door, right? Don't bring work home. Don't bring home to work, right? Does anybody think that's actually true? Is that possible? Are you able to just completely section off your home life from your work life and your work life from your home life? Absolutely not. We're not multiple people. We're still the same person, right? We know that that's a phrase often uttered it's been by employers, right? Because they want you to focus at work. They want you to be productive. But we know, and we focus on our mental health and wellness in the workplace, and especially when employers do that, right? And they make it an important part of their workplace culture. We see the things that we see on the screen, right? We see it makes sense for the business itself. You see increased productivity. You see higher engagement, right? You see lower rates of turnover, which is people leaving and having to rehire new people coming in to fill those jobs, right? Spending time on training and development when they could have just kept the same person, right? If they were satisfied, if that job was meeting their needs and they stayed, they wouldn't have to worry about that, right? So we know from a business sense, it makes sense. Now, does anybody know what the leading cause of lost productivity across the world is? What keeps people from being productive the most? Anybody wanna further a guess? Yeah. Lack of sleep. Yeah, man, that's good. That's a good one. Anybody else wanna? If there is like maybe a disease or a diagnosis or yeah. Depression. Anybody else? Well, you're spot on. It is. It's depression. It's depression. It's not even something we can physically see, right? That's followed up by like cardiovascular disease, tumors, diabetes, right? But notice depression is, according to the World Health Organization, the leading cause of ill health and disability. The leading cause of ill health and disability. And although it has been discussed more lately over the last few years, this is not a common topic, right? Especially when we're talking about the workplace, especially when we're talking about how it limits people's productivity, not just in the workplace, but in their lives, with their families, with their friends, with their loved ones. You know, mental health disorders are also just the single most expensive health cost for employers. And as you can see on here, and this number grows year to year, not just with the population, but also an increase proportionally as well of people estimated are living with depression in the world. That's a lot of people. That's like the entirety of the United States. That's a lot. So it's important that we keep that in mind. And again, it's not something that's always readily visible or readily talked about. You know, how many people, if they knew somebody was dealing with cancer or had a heart attack or diabetes, right, and they were in the workplace, and you heard about that and a coworker came back, right? More often than not, there would be get well cards or even a welcome back party or just people checking in, like, how are you doing? How are you feeling? Is there anything I can do? But if you had somebody coming back after a week or 2 weeks after going through a depressive episode where it was difficult for them to get out of bed or come into work or to make it to class, we don't often check in the same way. There's not necessarily a get well card, right? There's not necessarily a GoFundMe for that, right? And so we want to shift that culture and how we talk about our mental health, how we talk about our wellness, not just as individuals, right? But as a system as well, right? Systemically. Now, I want to go through another couple things when we're talking about the workplace, because I think it's important. And also, I feel, relates really well to education as well, right? Especially to higher education, especially for people balancing work and education. And that's a few stats, right? And we can go over each and every stat and break it down, but there's two things I want to define up here more than anything. And that's absenteeism and presenteeism. Absenteeism is pretty self-explanatory, right? It's, I was ill, I was either managing or not able to manage whatever illness I'm dealing with, and so I wasn't able to be at work, right? So, you know, that can happen, right? You're not at work, you're not at school, you're absent. But presenteeism is the fact that even though you are ill, even though you are unwell, you're still showing up to work, you're still showing up to class. And for a long time, our culture in the United States, like, we rewarded that. Right? There were people who would retire having never taken a sick day, and they would get a gold watch or a present or a certificate, and they would be heralded as such a hard worker, as so amazing. They never took a sick day. Now, after the last few years, I think we all know that not only is that not good public health, but it's not good for individuals either. But it's also not good for businesses. It's not good for workplaces. And again, this is not just saying at an office. This could be retail. Doesn't matter the work. People showing up and working while ill are less productive than if they had just taken some time off to get better, taken time off to get well. And that's not always necessarily on the individual, right? That's not always necessarily on the individual. We know that we need to have parity. We need to have things focused on people in the workplace to give people the ability to do that. And so how do we do that? Well, organizationally, businesses can have an EAP, right? They can focus on parity between behavioral health or mental health benefits and physical health benefits. They can encourage and expand time off and include mental health days lumped in together with their days off, so people don't have to necessarily disclose if they're taking a mental health day. And that's really important. And again, that's organizationally what they can do. But as a team, right? Whether you are a supervisor, whether you are a leader, whether it's in your title or not, right? Because sometimes you have people who step up and are just the voices in organizations, right, with your coworkers. We can talk about resources. What is available in the community or at our jobs, right? We can lead by example and take care of ourselves. Take the time off when we need it, right? Model the behavior that we wish to see in the rest of the workplace. And then also, if you're a supervisor, respectable workloads, right? Respectable workloads. Make sure that people are cared for in the workplace, because they will turn out better workers, and it's doing the right and just thing anyways. And then individually, we need to hold ourselves accountable. We need to take care of ourselves, and we're going to break that down in just a second. But more importantly, we need to speak up. What are our needs? We need to let people know what we need, right? We can't suffer in silence, right? We need to speak up. It's really, really important. We have to use our voice. So real quick, I want to show you a snapshot of some articles I saw we gathered during the early months of the pandemic, right? Business leaders launched the global collaboration for better workplace mental health, right? Mental health first aid in the workplace is about a culture of wellness. 4 ways to invest employee mental health. Could COVID-19 finally destigmatize mental illness? In, silver lining of the rough pandemic we've been through, we are talking about mental health more openly. But the point of these articles, and you can find many, many, many more of them now, is that now is the time. People are talking about mental health. They're talking about their wellness on an individual and regional and systemic level. Now's the time to use our voices to make sure that we're putting ourselves first. That's really important. Now is the time. So how do we do that? Well, we want to take care of ourselves. And at MHANYS, we like to say that self-care is unique, right? Everybody's self-care is going to look different. How we care for ourselves is going to look different. But there's a few key things here, is that it allows you to own your emotions. It doesn't suppress them, right? It lets us feel even the difficult things, even the difficult emotions, and process them. And it's a way to increase our self-worth. So how do we do that? How do we do that? How do we care for ourselves? I know for me, things that I like to do is I love to read. I love to get outside. I love to hike, spend time with my kids. Just really any of those interactions are really important to me. Listening to good music, positive music puts me in a better mood. And those are things that are important for me. But I want to hear from you in the audience. What are some things that you all do to take care of yourself? What are the things that you do, whether you consider it self-care or not, it is. What are the things that you do that make you feel good? What are the things that bring you joy on a daily or weekly or monthly basis? You all do things. I know you do. Everybody does things to make them feel better. Yeah. Yeah, listen to music. Yeah, it's a really popular one. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, watch sports, obviously. Yeah, and it's great when they do well, isn't it? Absolutely. And that's a good point, because I think sometimes there are things that we do for our wellness that might be really good at a certain time, but then other times they're not, and we have to be cognizant and mindful of that, right? Absolutely. Like, I'm a Met fan. This year's been up and down for me at the moment, so that happens. Yeah, over here.
My favorite thing is probably like a spa day or something at home. Trying like a new coffee shop or a new restaurant.
Yeah.
Usually puts me in a good
Absolutely. All wonderful things to do. Anybody else want to share? What do they do? Yeah. Book shopping. Yeah. And that's the thing. These things do. They release endorphins. They boost your serotonin. They make you feel better. Absolutely. Yeah, book shopping. I love books. I'm an avid reader. Yeah. Make music, right? Yeah. So the creative process is what makes you feel better? Absolutely. Okay. All right. Yeah. Yeah, watch movies. Fantastic. Yeah, sometimes screen time can be great, right? In moderation and the right amount. Anybody else want to share? Yeah.
I create and maintain strong boundaries.
Yeah.
It's something I've learned over the years.
Yeah, that is huge. And we could spend a whole voices, right, presentation on creating boundaries and maintaining that, because that's active. That's something you have to actively maintain. But absolutely, right? Sometimes you got to know when enough is enough, right? When you need to step away, or when you need to ask somebody else, like, hey, not now, right? Absolutely. And here's just some examples, right? It's just a simple, silly graphic. There are a million ways to care for yourself, but let me let you know what the biggest secret of self-care is. You don't have to be good at it. You don't have to be good at it. Do you like to dance, but you have 2 left feet? It doesn't matter. What matters is that it makes you feel good. Do you like to garden, but you have to replace those plants 10 times a year because they all die on you because you either overwater or underwater and you're never really sure what to do, how much sunlight to give them? Doesn't matter. If you enjoy it, if that's what makes you feel good, that's self-care. You don't have to be good at it. Right? I'm sure starting off making music was really difficult, but the more you did it, you got better. But in the beginning, ooh, boy, I bet, right? It's hard to gain a new skill. So I'm sure with some of the things that you all brought up today, you can challenge yourself to learn something new, or think of other things that make you feel good to add on to that list. That's really, really key, right? And as I mentioned before, what we do for self-care is going to change over time. It's going to change over time, and that's okay, right? We don't necessarily have to be good at it. But I challenge each and every one of you to use your calendar, do something to factor in self-care time on a daily basis. Find time to put it in your calendar. I know for me, when the only things that, like, my phone was going off on my calendar were like like dental appointments and due dates for school or for work, I was stressed when my phone would go off. I'd see in the morning what I had to do. But when I started putting in self-care activities like FaceTime calls, game nights, going out with friends, right, going out to eat, putting that stuff also in my calendar, all of a sudden I got to look at it, and when my phone would ding and go off, it wasn't that. It was like, oh man, there's something I have to do, but something I got to do. Something I get to do, something that I looked forward to. So I encourage all of you to use your calendar. Do whatever you can. List it, whatever way works for you, but do it on a daily basis. So when we're also talking about mental health, I think it'd be remiss not to touch on recovery. I mentioned this before. As you can see on the screen, recovery is something we don't often talk about, but it's the most possible outcome, right? It's the outcome that happens the most often for most people when they deal with a mental health challenge. 60–80% of people, right, who receive treatment and support experience positive outcomes. So for the vast majority of people, they recover. And recovery is unique to all of us, just as our self-care is, just as that our dimensions of wellness and where we see ourselves on a daily basis, it's going to be unique to us. But I'm sure each and every one of us knows somebody, right, who's managing some kind of chronic health condition. And a lot of times that person is still doing well. It's because a lot of times they focus on a holistic aspect of their wellness. They might not be doing well in the physical aspect, but their other areas of wellness is strong. They're doing well. And that's important that we keep that in mind, right? Recovery is not only possible, but it is the most likely outcome for the vast majority of us. So what can we do, right? On a daily basis, we can talk about mental health and wellness, and we can model that self-care. And if you happen to be in the workplace, if you happen to be a leader and you happen to be able to make decisions, I strongly encourage you to talk with leadership about codifying this into your work values. Employee wellness should be front and center. It makes your business stronger, makes your organization stronger, and it's the right thing to do, right? Provide trainings, be strategic, right? Measurable outcomes. Focus on actually improving things around mental health. So there are some things that outside of just your community resources and your college resources, which I've also heard that tomorrow is a wellness fair, so I hope you all attend it and find out more information. It's in the Seek Campus Center, correct, right? All right, so I get a gold star for that. But we also can be a resource for you as well, right? We have the Mental Health Information Center and Reentry Hotline. You guys can call us Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. You can leave a message even if somebody doesn't pick up, and we'll call you back, answer questions, get you pointed in the right direction if anybody needs anything. You can also use our website or email us as well, and we can get back to you. And I just want to thank all of you for coming out. If anybody has any questions, I'm more than happy to answer questions. But, you know, I appreciate that you guys are also in the middle of a busy school day. But I'm here. I'm available. I'd love to answer anything if anybody has anything. So thank you so much. Yeah.
So welcome back. What path did you take to get to where you are today? So you left us, and what happened next?
Sure, yeah, mine was a long path. So I was here, and I was just saying earlier, I think it was 2012 when I transferred out. I worked for a while. I was a non-traditional student, so probably like many of you, I didn't go to school right out of high school. So Hudson Valley for me was a later in life career choice. And then I lived in a bunch of different places. I ended up going to Willamette University out in Oregon, lived out there for a while. I studied anthropology, so people is the big thing for me, people, in whatever capacity. And then I had worked previously in mental health, and then when I moved back this way, it was a great opportunity to come in and do a little bit more of what I like. So, yeah, a little bit of everything. I've been all over the place, but yeah. If you don't have questions, that's perfectly fine too. I can also leave my card. You guys can get a hold of me. We have our information up here. You guys can reach out at any point, anytime as well. So, again, thank you guys for coming out, spending time with us, and I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day.